Undertale is a game that has really made its mark on the internet since its release. From Megalovania memes to Tumblr fandom leakage, it's difficult to avoid references to Undertale even in just casual browsing. People really love this game and its music and characters, and it's clear even to somebody that hasn't played the game that Undertale has impacted its fans in a profound way. While Undertale may have been the first major fandom I was personally exposed to, including all of the negatives that this entails, I never once got the impression that there was a bad game behind the memes or fan content. Unfortunately for Undertale, while being a game that's left a tremendous impact, it's also a game that's best experienced completely blind, which is not how I approached the game. On top of being generally exposed to some more intimate details, my brother was also really into the game on its release, which led to me helping him through some of the more difficult fights and learning a lot more about the plot than I would have liked before playing it myself. Fortunately, it's been many years since then, so I'd forgotten most of the details about Undertale by the time I started my own playthrough. I only remembered a few major moments and a few unique oddities about the game's design. What I hadn't remembered was how breathtakingly beautiful Undertale can be. The sprite work is clean and leads to some really outstanding locales to visit. I don't think Undertale is some revolutionary game graphically, and there's a few screens that are nothing special, but when the visuals hit, they hit hard. And the music is just on another level entirely. Toby Fox's compositional skills on full display throughout Undertale's entire runtime, with banger after banger coming at you constantly. Undertale's soundtrack has a powerful synth foundation that very often breaks from its obvious 16-bit influences, and without the soundtrack, the storytelling would be less effective. Undertale's soundtrack is filled to the brim with leitmotif, tying certain melodies to certain characters and moments, and these leitmotifs actually push the narrative forward in very subtle ways. Noticing a later leitmotif in earlier tracks on subsequent playthroughs conveys tiny bits of narrative information in such a brilliant way, allowing you to infer lore from the soundtrack alone. This isn't even mentioning the way the game takes its existing tracks and applies tempo effects to change the mood entirely. The music really is the backbone of this game. And the soundtrack isn't the only thing deeply connected to the narrative either. The gameplay itself prompts players to make decisions that have immense consequences for the outcome of the game. Undertale is a turn-based RPG with radical differences from conventional JRPGs. In any battle, you may choose to fight and kill, or to talk it out and spare your opponent. Both options entail distinct gameplay styles on your turn, and then the enemy's turn presents a third, a bullet hell style dodging game whose gameplay can then be further modified by different properties in specific battles. As someone who values unique mechanics in RPGs, this combat system was excellent, and your choices in combat lead to 3 distinct player-driven stories: the neutral route, the pacifist route, and the genocide route. Although I experienced the neutral ending, I never played an explicit neutral route game, instead continuing that playthrough onto the pacifist route. The pacifist route is taken by sparing every monster, creating a puzzle game as you navigate social settings in battle and actual puzzles outside of it. On this route, the characters and humor shine bright. Undertale's cast of characters is, for the most part, extremely likable and fun to interact with. The game is genuinely hilarious, but the story and lore you'll uncover from progressing alongside these characters hits some tragic and downright horrifying beats as well. Undertale's neutral and pacifist narrative is extremely deep, conveys a wide range of emotions, and is overwhelmingly enjoyable to experience. And that brings us to the genocide route. What I want to talk about here does bring us into spoiler territory, and since I do think that the game is best enjoyed without knowledge of what I'm going to mention, I'd advise that anyone who hasn't played the game yet should skip ahead to the timestamp above. Undertale is a game intended to be played multiple times, exploring the different routes you can take. In fact, I'm sure I was never meant to jump straight into the pacifist run. What you discover on subsequent playthroughs is a bizarre meta-narrative that persists between playthroughs. The genocide run is when that really comes to the forefront. Genocide has a lighter and shorter storyline than pacifist because the inhabitants of the underground are really just trying to escape from you, the villain. The game knows how unlikely it is that you start this run by accident, and takes full advantage of the emotional pain you go through killing those you befriended on your last runs by leaning into that meta-narrative, diving into the morality of your choices in a way that would be impossible in any other medium, and adding a layer of lore to the world that depends on Undertale being a video game. It's really something spectacular. Along the same lines, Undertale buries a startling amount of lore beneath niche Easter eggs and actual data mining, again allowing you to exploit the fact that this is a video game to get more out of it. This feature alone explains to me why the game reached such monumental popularity. Everything discovered this way is so bizarre and cryptic that trying to understand it as a community must have been a great time. Unfortunately, this is also a minor point against the console versions. While the Switch version had exclusive lore and a new battle of its own, you simply cannot squeeze every drop of content out of the game without access to its files. And while that's such a minor point that won't affect the vast majority of players, and you can always do what I did and explore the wiki after your playthrough, it means that some of the artistic value of Undertale is lost on non-PC users. And it's probably worth touching on Sans for a brief moment. The final boss of Genocide is a brutal challenge, the last moment desperately trying to stop you from completing the atrocities you commit on this path. It's absolutely punishing, infinitely more difficult than anything that's come before, plays dirty by subverting all expectations of RPG combat and attacking you while you're in the menu, but it's super consistent and satisfying to get good at, which may miss the narrative point of the fight being so difficult in the first place. Sans is the epitome of what Undertale is, the culmination of the game's outstanding soundtrack, layers of story, and tight gameplay. Failing to beat Sans and to finish the Genocide run is as narratively significant as beating him, something I've never seen in any game before. The last time I played a game that was this much of a complete package where every aspect of its being comes together and interacts in such spectacular fashion was Celeste, which is one of the greatest games that I have ever played. And while I can't say that Undertale reached exactly that level of quality for me personally, this is a really, really good game that deserves all the attention it's gotten over the years. The lore is deep, the gameplay is great, the narrative makes me feel a wide range of emotions, and the soundtrack is outstanding. All of this together makes Undertale an easy recommendation. And if you disagree, square up. We're fighting now.